So what is chapter 1 all about? The book begins by noting that every human being is morally flawed. And so what we begin off in that chapter is the daily occurrence of ethical dilemmas. I face ethical dilemmas every day. When the alarm goes off in the morning, should I get up? I go downstairs, I have a cup of coffee. Should I have regular coffee or should I have fair trade coffee? If I drink fair trade coffee, I'm guaranteed that the person that picked those coffee beans is making a living wage. So we just talk about every day you make all these decisions, and these decisions can have good impacts on people or not so good impacts on people. I also talk about managers as victims of unethical behavior. Theft is high in a lot of organizations. You want to be aware of that. I talk about the fact that every profession has ethical dilemmas, ethical problems. Every organization, religious organizations have ethical dilemmas. Business organizations have ethical dilemmas. Government organizations have ethical dilemmas. So they're all over the place. Every operational area in a business has ethical dilemmas. There's ethical dilemmas in accounting departments. There's ethical dilemmas in marketing. There's ethical dilemmas in human resource management. Then I talk about the cost associated with unethical behaviors, because by letting unethical behaviors continue, they can cost you a lot, with the most obvious cost of being lawsuits. Look in the newspapers, huge lawsuits all the time. Why? Because organizations are not systematically managing ethics the way that they ought to. But even something that's small, let's say you have a boss who's a bully. A boss who's a bully can cost the organization a lot of money that you may not be aware of. There's a lot of good research out there that says, if my boss is an unethical bully, let's say that I know something is wrong with the organization. Should I tell my boss? If my boss is an unethical bully, no, because I want my boss to get fired. I'm also afraid that if I tell my boss something is wrong, they might fire me and they might get mad at me. Unethical bosses have high turnover rates and a lot of other costs that are associated with that. Usually as soon as an unethical boss gets away from work, people play solitaire on the computer. They do anything they can because they want to get even with the unethical boss. So that's a small part of the chapter. Next, there's a discussion on human nature that you don't see in any business ethics books. And because the idea of business ethics is all about human nature. A discussion about, are people born good? Are people born bad? Are people born neutral? Are people born with prior knowledge of right or wrong, which is what Plato argues? So there's a little discussion of all of those because they have implications in terms of how we behave in life. Chapter 1 also has discussion on cognitive development. Initially, a baby has one brain and everything is part of the baby's brain and can't differentiate between what they think and anybody else's think, and they think everybody thinks whatever the baby thinks. By about a year and a half, the baby realizes not everybody in the world thinks the way that I think, and I might think differently, but of course I think right and they think wrong. So there's a section about cognitive development and how the brain functions so that you become, it's really not until you're an adult that you can really talk about universal fairness. But you hire a lot of teenage kids at work. They're not quite adults yet and they may not understand universal fairness, so you want to be aware of that. There's a section, of course, on stages of moral development, that people evolve over time from one moral way of reasoning to the next. And as a manager, you want to be aware of that. If my employees are a bunch of egoists, I need to talk to them like they're an egoist. All they care about is themselves. I don't tell them, I want you to work hard because it's going to be good for your soul. I don't tell them I want you to work hard because it's good for the company. If they're an egoist, they don't care. I tell them, I want you to work hard because if you don't, you're going to get fired. I don't have to say that to somebody who's a utilitarian because they're not worried about being fired and they're not worried about their ego. So you want to know what stage of moral development your employees are at and talk to them in that language. A little bit about lies and cheating. They're prevalent in college, they're prevalent at work. Just look at the court cases, how many perjury cases are out there. Last part of that chapter is, why do good people behave unethically? Because most of us are good. But despite being good, sometimes if our boss says, when the supplier calls up about, have we paid their bill yet? Tell the supplier the check is in the mail. You know the check's not in the mail. supplier knows that's not the check is in the mail, but your boss is asking you to lie. You're a good person. What do you do in situations like that? Sometimes people do bad things on purpose, but a lot of times it's not as though we don't have evil intent. Sometimes there's conflicts between competing goods. I want to be loyal to my boss, but say if I know that my boss is skimming some money. Do I tell anybody? Because I love my boss, and I like my boss a lot. But do I tell anybody? So those issues are outlined in chapter 1.